Hi everyone, welcome to this month's AdEspresso webinar, and the topic this month is how to write high converting ad copy for your Facebook ads. I'm Paul, I'm the AdEspresso community manager, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Anna Gotta. Now, Anna's a freelance copywriter and content marketer, and she's been writing for AdEspresso kind of really since the early days of the company, so at least 3 years. When we were quite a smaller company before we got acquired by Hootsuite. She specializes in PPC copy, and she's seen how single changes in ad text can really drastically reduce your cost per click there. So thank you everybody for joining us today. We've actually got a record number of people joining us on the webinar, a record number of signups and attendees. So really appreciate everybody taking the time out of their day to join us today. Yeah, and I'm going to hand over to Anna now. So welcome, Anna.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. So we've got a couple of housekeeping things here. The videos will go up on the YouTube channel and the Facebook page after it's over. There's going to be time for Q&A as we go along and at the end, so feel free to submit your questions. And I'm going to have information about copy packages at the end of the webinar with some special discounts for our AdEspresso users. And Paul already introduced me, so thank you for that. Okay, so let's dive right in. The importance of writing great copy. Copy can and absolutely will make or break your campaigns. Images can grab user attention, but the copy is going to explain the offer and inform users why they should click. This is so important. Writing a variety of strong copy quickly is also going to give you more to split test, which is going to help you improve your current results and those of future campaigns, because you're going to be able to better assess what's working and what's not. It's also going to mean that you're going to be able to keep your campaigns fresh and updated, even if you're using the same basic offer, which is a huge advantage because it's going to keep your frequency score lower. So what is great copy? That's a really important first question. It should explain to users why they need to click and take a specific action. It should be tailored to your specific audience. It should absolutely always match your brand voice. That's really, really important because omni-channel selling is a thing and you want your brand to match across all platforms. You also want your copy to be informative without having so much information that it's overwhelming. You don't want people to see a block of text and then just not want to read. Think of it sort of like as a teaser, and your landing page will be the full movie. So this is not great copy so much. This is an example of what you don't want to do. There is no information, and when Paul sent me this, I laughed pretty hard about this one. Shows the importance of how much copy can actually make a difference on your campaign. This is another example of what we do not want to do. It looks like spam, and to be honest, I would think I would get a virus if I clicked on it and it somehow made it past AdEspresso sensors. There are spaces between the letters, everything's in all caps. Overall, just stuff you don't want to do. No idea what you're actually getting here. So again, bad example number 2. So in this webinar, I'm going to take you through the system that I actually use to write copy for my clients. There are 5 steps and then a quick split testing. And so we'll take you through all of these. You're going to see that you're not actually going to be writing until step number 4. That's intentional. The research and planning stages are so important to help you really understand your strategy and to make sure it's a right fit for your audience. All right. So the first step, defining your audience. It's no surprise that this is going to be the first step to any great campaign when you're writing copy. You really want to be able to see your audience as real people instead of just a mass of faces in this sea. You want to understand what drives them and how different factors will affect who your audience is. So these are questions that I always ask myself or I ask my clients at the very beginning stages of the copy when we're deciding who the audience is going to be and what strategy we're going to go with. You want to ask yourself who specifically you're targeting: age, demographics, interest, custom audiences, which implies some sort of pre-existing relationship with your business, how that's going to impact your strategy. How does this specific audience interact with or benefit from my brand or products? What specific needs can my offer help them with? Are you targeting a specific niche within your audience? At this point, you can also kind of look around and see if there's any niches that you might be missing. All of this is going to come into play. Different audiences respond to different things. One audience niche might jump at an offer, while it might actually push other audience members away. So it's really, really important to have a good idea of what drives your audience so you can write the best ad copy that's most relevant to them. So I'm actually going to talk about a real life example here. I worked as a sales associate at K Jewelers for a little while, and there's obviously lots of different niches that come in. We have women buying jewelry for themselves, women buying watches for men, men buying get out of the doghouse presents for women, and then of course you have men buying engagement rings. And the hard part was that I eventually figured out, even amongst the men who were buying engagement rings, they were all broken down into 3 main groups, and they needed to be sold to in different ways. The first, they really wanted to be swept up kind of in the romance of it all. They needed to have a gut feeling about the ring, and they wanted to talk about how the ring was going to sparkle under the moonlight when he proposed. Then we had some who were very scientific about it. They wanted to know about the 4 C's and how it affected price and quality. And then there was a third group where they really wanted to know they were just getting the best that money could buy. They were looking at the luxury, at the brand names, at the exclusivity. Those are 3 very different groups and very different audiences who all needed to be sold to in different ways. So keep that in mind when you're creating your ads and looking at your different audiences. Run split tests, because you want to find the messaging that's going to work best. And sometimes that is harder to do over Facebook ads where you can't read those cues in person, but that's why understanding your audience is so important. So I also want to take a quick look at how your audience is going to impact the specific language that you use. This ad is obviously geared towards women. The image makes that clear right off the bat, but there's also some language that points that out, and that's shoe obsessed. So I looked at lots of ads that this brand ran, and not a single one for men or men and women used the term shoe obsessed. It was only ads for women. So that's considered a feminine trait, and they could have risked actually pushing potential customers away if they ran this ad for men. One thing I do want to point out really quickly is that when you're looking at your audience, you do kind of want to stay away from stereotypes. You have to be really, really careful with them. They are more often than not relatively superficial traits that aren't actually going to help you connect with your audience, and you actually kind of run the risk of potentially offending them. It's much better to focus on those deep-seated desires and motivations and the pain points that your customers have. That's going to be a much better way to connect to them, and in the end, when you do that, the copy is going to kind of write itself. Okay, so for step number 2, we're going to look for the emotional appeal. It's important to have your audience first, because you start to have an idea of who they are, what they want, and only then will you be able to start to discover what emotional appeal you think will be most effective for this audience and the product that you're showing to them. Emotional appeals can help establish a more lasting connection with your target audience. They can be a powerful motivator that encourages them to convert. It can emphasize the importance of customer needs and pain points, which you really want to bring to the surface when they see your copy. The emotion that you're going for is absolutely going to shape your strategy and even the language and punctuation that you use. So I kind of have an example here. If you want users to be excited, you're going to use exclamation points and language that generates excitement and urgency, like best and last minute and groundbreaking. Emotions can and often should go beyond just happy and sad. Going for the more abstract emotions like nostalgic and adventurous, or having a feeling of security or safety, those work really, really well, and they can be more specific to your audience and your pain points that you're trying to optimize for. So this is a picture of Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe coined the idea that when you're writing a short story, you want to go for a single definitive effect. You want to do the same thing with your copy. His was obviously horror. Ours might be going for a feeling of romance or joy or sentimentality. Focus on that single appeal. It's going to be a lot more effective, and it's going to help you accomplish your goals. examples. So what happens without emotional appeal? Because I can already hear a few of you thinking in the back, well, I sell refrigerators. That's not emotional appeal. I actually argue that most ads, if not all of them, are really going to benefit from having that emotion in there. It can be the difference between an ad that gets a couple clicks, a couple conversions, and one that just has conversions and ROI off the charts. Emotional appeal is important. So let's look at this ad and what happens without it. This is an ad for some homes from a real estate agent, and it's treating homes kind of like a commodity, which they are, but home buying is also a very, very emotional, sentimental process. I don't picture myself living in these homes from the copy, whereas, if we take a look at some of the examples of the rough copy I have here on the side, and focuses more on imagine yourself living here, imagine having these family gatherings, playing outside with the kids. This is important. You want to encourage someone to imagine themselves making memories here in this specific example, and the current ad copy just doesn't do that. So let's take a look at a couple more examples of what emotion and ad copy can look like, because it does not have to be hitting you over the head with it. It can be very subtle. So this is an ad from Plated, and it clearly goes for kind of that emotional connection and the sentimentality of having a dinner with family and friends. It obviously has another selling point. It's convenient, but instead they focus on the emotional because they know that'll be more likely what gets people to click. It does this with just 2 words, fun and memories added in. But that's all that's needed. In a lot of cases, simple really is going to be best. And that's the case here. So this ad is going for something a little bit different. It's going for that sense of adventure. It makes you want to kind of pack up your car and go hiking or surfing, neither of which are things I'm personally inclined to do. They do this with just one simple sentence: make the best of every terrain. It's a small statement, but it has a really big implication of you can travel the world in these cars. Okay, and last but not least, tired of losing your keys, wallet, or phone? Anyone who has lost any of these things while they're running late for a meeting will understand the frustration of this ad immediately. They're really capitalizing on that frustration to, really, it puts you in that mindset of like, okay, I need a solution for this because I don't want this to happen again. And then they immediately position themselves as the solution. So again, it doesn't have to be super, super emotional with purple prose. It can be really simple, and that's all that you need. Okay, so step number 3, we're going to be choosing a feature benefit selling point for our ads. Feature benefit selling is a classic sales technique that involves stating a specific feature that your product has and then explaining how and why that feature benefits customers. This is a great way to list and advertise some of your features as unique selling points, and then immediately following it up in a way that demonstrates real value to your audience. It tells them why they should click, why they should buy this. Goes without saying, this should align with your emotional appeal and be written with your specific audience in mind, because different audience niches are going to have different needs, and therefore different feature benefit selling points are going to appeal more to them. So this is an example right here. One thing that I want to point out is that a lot of times in Facebook ads, you will see the benefit listed before the feature in order to kind of grab user attention quickly. Totally fine. So for this one, we have the ad copy of hate wearing bulky fitness trackers. Smart Buckle upgrades the watch you already own into a smart health and fitness tracker with style in mind. So the feature here, you get to upgrade a watch that you already own to a fitness tracker. Nice and simple. The benefit, you already have it. It's not bulky. You can track your fitness and health and style. You don't have to worry about not liking wearing one of the other fitness trackers, so you can wear it more often. I know that's something that's a pain point I have with my Fitbit. I can't wear it when I go to nice meetings. So this is really well done. Again, very easy for users to see what exactly they can get out of this. Okay, So now, step number 4, use storytelling elements to bring it all together. This is where we are going to go ahead and write the ad. So I'd love to, Paul, if we have any questions, I'd love to answer some.
Yeah, we got one from Tamanda. I think it's got a little bit cut off here, but they're asking how you can write emotional appeal in your ads without risking getting flagged as well, rejected by Facebook. And I think we discussed that earlier, didn't we? That we've got to be careful with certain things. That you've got to look at the Facebook ad policies for things like pain. That can be a big problem.
Absolutely. So I think it is a fine line, and that's where you don't want to make big statements that aren't true. You don't want to necessarily cause, I know, like causing fear and things like that is a big no-no you want to avoid. It's something where it is a fine line, but if done well, you're really kind of going just for subtle emotion, and something where you're trying to make people happy or something like that, or nostalgic or evoke a memory. And we're going to look a little bit more about how to do that in this next step. But that is actually a really good question, because that's a fine line you have to walk.
Another question, because it's actually World Emoji Day today. Would you, this Facebook's actually keeps bombarding everybody with these little emoji videos, which are quite fun. How would you recommend using emojis in your ad text, and how would you use them if so?
That's a really good question. So in general, I am not as my personal style, I personally typically stay away from emojis a little bit more, but I've seen some brands use them really, really well. And that's actually something I'm going to talk a little bit more about later on in the webinar. But, I've seen people use emojis where that describe the product in some way, or they have the heart eyes, or I know I wrote an ad campaign once that said, it was a retargeting campaign, and the headline was something like, "We saw you looking," and then we used a little winky face there, and that campaign actually did really well. So typically they're going to work for campaigns that are a little bit more casual and that have typically some sort of sense of humor involved in them.
Awesome. We'll answer a couple more, then I'll let you get on. So Hardip's asking, if you're like struggling with a low click-through rate, would you recommend testing the images or the ad copy first? What's going to make the biggest difference in your ads there?
So it really depends. If you have done any testing in the past and you know that certain types of images work and then your ad just isn't doing so great, go ahead and test the copy. The same is true vice versa. Sometimes it really is very difficult to track down, so you kind of have to test everything involved to get a good feeling. If your ads are ever performing just really, really awfully, like crazy high CPCs, low clicks, go ahead and pause the ad and maybe test some different strategies on a different type of ad or a different audience at that point, and see if you can get a little bit closer onto the right track, so you're not spending, like, I actually saw a campaign once that had $35 per click on something that they were making at max $15 profit. So it was kind of a fine line where we had to stop and reassess. I personally always go from the copy perspective. I think the copy is really, really important. And it's a little bit easier to sometimes change up a little bit.
Cool. And we'll just take one more now. There's loads of questions coming in, but from Chase, he's asking, how do you use emotion for direct response ads?
So that's a good question. It's one of the, that one can be a little bit trickier, but it's still, even when you're selling to businesses or companies or anything like that, all people have desires and needs. So those are always tied to some sort of emotion. And we're going to look a little bit more at that in this next section. So I'm going to go ahead and say, let's go ahead and move into here, because I think this will answer some questions people have about how to use emotion in different types of copy.
Awesome. I'll let you get on, and we've got more questions and we'll answer those later in the webinar.
Perfect. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so I think this will probably clear up a lot of questions that people may have. Storytelling elements in ad copy. This is really going to bring everything together. It's going to offer ways that you can bring out those emotional appeals. So again, this is going to be where we're actually writing those ads. Storytelling, for what it's worth, does not mean that you need to be writing 6 paragraphs. You can do it in just a single sentence. Again, the storytelling and the emotion really do go hand in hand together. So in a lot of ways, the storytelling is going to be the actual execution of the emotional side of things. It's about setting a scene, making your ad more memorable and relatable to your audience. This is where you're going to be able to help them envision using your product, service, event in their daily life and help them see how it's going to impact them long term. So let's look at a quick example of this. Which speaks to you more? Save time with this tool is option number 1. Or we have the second option. Are you tired of working late hours? Cut back the time you spend on administrative tasks so you can spend more time. Let's see, sorry, everything froze here a little bit. Spend time with your family, giving you your life back. The first one is fine. It states a benefit, nice and simple. But the second one is the one that's really going to set a scene. You imagine yourself working late hours, dusk till dawn, super tired, stressed, but then this offers the solution of you get those nights off, you get more time with your family, you get to go on that vacation. It's a very, very small statement. It's a very, very short story, but it's a relatable one that your target audience, it will resonate with them. And it's enough that it's going to make your ad more memorable. So this is another example of really brief storytelling in ads. Don't leave your holiday cleaning until the last minute. That is actually a story because you're imagining yourself with company coming, guests are on the way, and the house is a mess. I know I've been there once or twice. And so this is something that, again, is going to be relatable to that target audience, and it sets a scene. It gives you something in your mind that you can relate to, that's memorable, that maybe raises your blood pressure just a little bit, and then it offers a solution right afterwards. So this is this very simple, easy way to use a very basic story, but in a way that's very effective. Okay, so now we're going to match the ad with a dedicated landing page. Just because you've written this great ad copy, unfortunately, the job is not over quite yet. So you need to be hyper conscious about where your ads are sending your target audience, because this is where you might see a pretty high click-through rate, but then no conversions. You're seeing lots of drop-offs on the landing page. If that's something you're experiencing, there's most likely a problem with the landing page, and there could be an issue with targeting, but both things should be looked at. Ultimately, when you send users to a dedicated landing page, you're going to get much better results. You can send them to a specific product page if you're trying to drive sales. This will increase conversions. It's also going to make it easier to get your ads approved by Facebook ads because they want to see that everything is matching up. It's going to give you the chance to create custom offers with different messaging that your audience niches are going to be most responsive to. Worth pointing out that your landing page should absolutely match your ad in tone and emotional appeal. You can either detail more benefits on the landing page or elaborate on the benefits that you've already listed in the ads, which has gotten users to click. So some of you may have seen this ad. It may be partially how you got here. This ad matches this landing page. The landing page has everything you need. It explains more about why you should listen to the webinar and the benefits that you're hopefully getting right now. And then it also has the sign up right there. So users don't have to go anywhere. They don't have to go looking for anything. They convert really quick before they even think twice about it. So now, step number 6, you've got your copy, you've got your landing page, you're ready to start executing your ad campaigns. One of the things I have always loved about AdEspresso and have always been so excited about is the ability to split test copy so easily within the platform. Split testing is going to help you find what really works for your audience and your specific audience niches. You can test different strategies, offers, messaging, ad text length, styles of ad. We talked about the emojis. We also have things like the bullet lists and long paragraphs, short paragraphs, one-word sentences. You can test all of that very, very quickly. So what we do, and Paul had helped me kind of get this structure set up to begin with, you can create different ad sets. And this is what we do, where it'll have 2 to 3 different headlines and 3 to 6 different matching ad texts. They're all going for the same appeal, the same pain point. And then we split test them within AdEspresso to see which combination works. So this is what this looks like. We've got some rough copy here, and we have multiple headlines, and then we have multiple ad texts. And this is showing all sorts of different combinations that you can create. You're going to be able to test everything. It's fantastic. It's what we do all the time, and it really gives us a lot of insight because each audience is going to be different, even from business to business. You can look at someone right next door who has a very similar business model. You're going to have slightly different audience members, so you have to see what works for you. Okay, so now we're going to be moving into the last section of the webinar, which is going to be the copywriting best practices. These are going to be able to help you get your ad up and running, write great copy, have the writing itself be stronger. So the very first one is stick to clear, simple sentence structures. This is going to help everyone who's listening to this webinar, but especially if you maybe don't have writing training or education, or maybe you're not the naturally strongest writer out there. This will be what saves your life. Simple sentence structures are going to help you avoid grammatical issues that would cause you to lose credibility, run-on sentences that can be confusing, and even sometimes just muddled meanings where you get a little lost in your own thoughts. And something might make sense to you, but it doesn't make sense to anybody else. This is the way to go. Simple, simple, simple sentences. You can use a couple commas, but skip the semicolons for the most part, and everything should be said within a breath. Okay, test different lengths and styles of copy. We kind of touched on this in the split testing section, but it's important enough we want to recap it. I've seen a lot of times where clients come to me and they're like, oh, we want this style of copy. And I ask them, if that's what you want, we'll do that 100%, but have you tested other lengths and styles and those emojis and the bullet lists and all these other things? And a lot of times they'll say, no, we know this works, this is what we want to do. And that's fine, but if they ever do decide to test, sometimes they're surprised by the test results. I know, Paul, you and I have talked about that. Sometimes it's surprising what actually performs best. An important part of split testing is that you never really get kind of complacent with where you are. You always want to keep looking to see if something new is working best for different platforms. Okay, again, make sure everything matches. This includes your ad text, description, and landing page. It's also going to include whatever visual elements that you're going to incorporate here. Believe it or not, so many ads do not seem to match up. You can sometimes clearly see that something has been a kind of poorly executed split test, or maybe the copy just wasn't written super clearly, where the headline barely matches your description. I know one example I saw, I actually couldn't find it, I looked, was from a yoga studio, and their headline had something about, the benefit listed was get physically stronger, get toned, but then the description was talking about mindfulness. And the two, even though obviously they can be related, they really didn't work together in an ad, and it felt very disjointed. You need some sort of connection, or you need to scrap it all together and start over and go back to the drawing board and write copy that does match. Okay, number 4, remember that your CTA is part of your ad copy. Some people have a slightly longer CTA placed in the text, that's fine. But even if you're just using the CTA button, you need to make sure that that aligns well with the copy that you've chosen. Sometimes shop now will be the best choice. Sometimes for really big purchases, however, learn more is going to be a better option, especially if you want users to sort of slowly, they'll need a little bit more buying time, a little bit more research time to make it through the funnel. Learn more is a good low pressure option in that situation. So take this all into account. Feel free to test a couple of the CTA buttons and see what gets you the most conversions. Number 5, test copy using similar images or videos in similar ad formats. This kind of touches on a question I know that we had a little bit earlier about which do you test if something's not working, the copy or the images. Whatever you test keeps the other, you need a control in the situation, so keep something consistent. What I typically recommend doing is testing copy using the same image or very similar images across the board while you switch the different styles, the different messages, the different offers. Of course, you want the video and the image to be relevant to the copy, but this will give you a much better control situation and it'll help you decide what's actually working. Because I think we all know, a video ad and a carousel ad, those are two very different mediums, and if you switch everything up, you're not going to be able to see what's actually working and driving those different results. All right, so we're pretty much at the end of the webinar now. If you need some more help with your copy, I do sell copywriting and content marketing packages through my business. Typically starting points, ad sets with up to 3 headlines and 4 ad texts start at $400. It's a little bit of a discount for our AdEspresso users. Strategy development is included with that, so we talk about your audience and the goals, the specific goals you want to accomplish. Discounts are available when you're purchasing multiple ad sets at once, and packages are really customized for each individual client. So here's my contact information. You can get in touch with me at my site. There's a contact page there, annagoddard.com. All right, and that is what we've got. Paul, I'm ready for the questions. Hit me with them.
Awesome. That's a really good strategy there, Anna. I'd really recommend to anybody going through those steps and starting with those audience. Think about how you can put emotion. I think sometimes all of us we've got a really nice product and just focus on the product and forget that we're actually showing ads to real life humans. We're not just showing some stats out there. Also recommend anybody got any questions, just reach out to Anna via her website. I've worked with a lot of copywriters, and a lot of them haven't really got used to digital marketing. A lot of people are still used to the situation maybe 5 years ago or so, where they really used to like traditional print or maybe email, but haven't really got down to the idea of how to write ads, that are really relevant for mobile and for Facebook. So yeah, I'd really recommend everyone reach out to Anna. We've got quite a few questions coming in. So I've got first one here from our good buddy Riaz, who's in Canada, and also Christos, who's in Greece. They've asked the same question about, would you be using questions at all in your ad copy, and would you like put a question in the headline or in the ad text itself? Is that something that you see work for ad copy?
Absolutely. That's something that I know I've used in many campaigns. Asking a question you know the answer to is a fantastic strategy. Are you tired of losing your cell phone? The answer to that is always going to be yes. Yeah, so that's a great strategy, and it's one that I really recommend.
Cool. We've got, I think it's Who here. Apologies, I pronounced this wrong. Who's asking, are there any patterns that you would recommend? Do you have like a template or a formula or anything like that?
So, I don't, but that's actually a really good question. I know we ran that AdEspresso copy test. I don't think we ever turned that into a blog post, but if we do, I bet we could create some different templates to go with. I think that would be a good one. I'll have to stay tuned for the AdEspresso blog. You might see some of those coming up.
Yeah, just so everybody knows, we did an experiment where we split tested 7 different ad copies, different lengths, some using bullet points, some paragraphs, some just one line, and that should be published quite soon. So I know our editor Flavia is tuning into this webinar, so we'll give her a push to get that published there. And also, I think with templates is just remember to try and do something a little bit different. Is there's now 6 million advertisers on Facebook, and sometimes it feels like about 4 million of them are all using the same formula. So templates are obviously good to save time, but try and find something a little bit different sometimes.
Absolutely. I always recommend, if you're going to use something like a template, and this is something that I have a good friend too, he's all about the templates, and I'm like, that doesn't always work. You have to use the templates as a starting point. You can't fall back on it. It's the same thing where you don't want your customer service team to be stuck on a template loop where they can't break out of that cycle. You want to be able to appropriately resolve customer issues on a personalized basis. The same is really true for ad copy. It's an okay starting point, but you don't want to get limited by it. And it's like Paul says, you absolutely want to find ways to stand out and be different.
Then we've got Magdalena asking, what's the best copy for retargeting campaigns?
That is a very broad question, so that's kind of hard to answer. With retargeting, the best thing about that is that you can get really, really, really specific. You know the exact relationship that your audience has, or pretty close to it. So, like an example is, for the retargeting campaign that I mentioned earlier for the client, where it was a beauty product item and we were just retargeting website visitors. So we saw you looking winky face, right? That worked really well for that audience. But audiences are so different. That's actually kind of a hard one to answer. It really is just use your knowledge of that specific audience and what they need from you and any potential objectives or objections, excuse me, that they might have, and why they haven't bought yet. Focus on those sorts of things and you'll be able to write the best copy for them.
Cool. We've also got a webinar on retargeting, which I ran last month. So if anybody's interested in that, I give some examples, and you can just go onto the AdEspresso YouTube channel. And we've got some people asking about some of the points that you covered at the beginning of the webinar, if they missed those. Just jump onto our YouTube channel. We'll put this up within a few hours, so you can look there. Got loads and loads of questions from different people, from Magdalena. I saw one there from Tamanda. Some other people asking about the length of ad copy and headlines. So have you got any tips on what length's working best for you?
So it really does. I mean, I know this isn't a good answer, but it depends so much on the specific audience. One thing that I will say is that you absolutely want to take a look at how your ad copy is going to look on mobile, on Instagram, all the different platforms you're running your ad on. Go ahead and preview and make sure that the spaces are falling at the right spot and that nothing's getting cut off in a way that you wouldn't want it to. It really does depend on your different audiences. I've seen ad copy that I think has 5 words and that's enough to convert, but that's really only for that specific product where maybe the company next to it, they use 4 paragraphs and that's what gets them the best results. The only way that you're going to find out is to test it. And I do recommend that while you're in kind of the beginning stages of figuring that out, go ahead and hire a copywriter who knows how to write copy well, because especially once you start getting into more than 1 or 2 sentences, it gets very difficult to do that well. So paying a professional to do that's typically a pretty good idea.
Awesome. I found a really good tip was just to use Twitter a reasonable amount, especially in the old days when Twitter was a lot shorter, is that if you could get really good at writing tweets, if you've put out, a few thousand tweets, you should get really, really good at condensing like paragraphs down into like 140 characters. We've got Fazio asking, yeah, I think I used to be on Twitter all the time before Facebook really took over. And when you've done like 10,000 tweets, you kind of like get really good at short form copy. Fazio is asking, yeah, Fazio is asking about the difference between like Facebook and Instagram there. Is there anything different that you do on Instagram with like hashtags or like text length or anything different on there?
Sure. So again, I know not a good answer, but once again, it depends on the audience, on the ad. I say no to hashtags on Twitter ads. It's something that audiences don't really expect. They can tell that it's an ad, so it's not necessary. For the length, you want to make sure that when you're previewing it on Instagram, that the most important part of the copy is visible. So that's where, sort of like we talked about early on in the feature benefit section, some companies will list the benefit before the feature. The benefit's really going to tell customers, this is why you want to buy. So featuring that first at the very beginning of the ad text, or roping users in, like some of the our webinar viewers have asked about, using a question to kind of grab attention really quickly. You want to make sure that that full statement is visible so that they can take it from there and they'll watch the video, look at the image, click to read more. Anything that you need at that point. That's the key thing there.
Great. And then we've got Jose asking, do you find that quotes are useful to spark emotion and tell a story?
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
Jose's asking about whether you use quotes to go and spark any emotion and tell a story.
I personally don't, and it could just be I took a lot of lit classes in college, right? But they always tell you like don't just use a quote unless you can't just drop it in. You have to establish a lot of context. I think I've seen some ads that do this okay, but I think it really, really depends. It would have to be done really well, and it would have to be very relevant to the ad. I think it would probably work better for ad copy that's a little bit longer than ad copy that's shorter, but I haven't actually tested that for myself. It's a good question.
Yeah, and that's something where in AdEspresso, or you can do it through Ads Manager, but just a bit more time consuming. Just test different things. One thing I will say I found personally is that certainly if you're using anything like testimonials, they work better later in the funnel. So top of the funnel when it's the first touch, just explain what the product is and why people need the product, and then try and like use the testimonials more for retargeting to build up that social proof. But there's no point in giving people testimonials about the product until they know what the product is. Just so we've got loads of
Absolutely. No, that's
extra.
a really, really good point. I didn't even think of testimonials as quotes, but no, absolutely. If you have testimonials, use them in ad campaigns. I have a couple going right now that are actually doing really well.
Cool. Just looking, loads of questions here, but another one from Fazio say about the difference between like using paragraphs versus bullet points. Do you have any preference? Do you ever use bullet points or do you prefer like flowing ad copy there?
Once again, depends on the audience. I personally prefer to keep things really, really short. So I like the bullet points. Sometimes if you're telling a big long story, which I know some writers have done and advertisers have done and gotten great results, um, the longer text can work. But for most businesses, my guess would be that the bullets would work a little bit better because it's scannable. And you want users to quickly be able to scan your ad copy as much as possible to get a very quick answer to their question, why do I care? Why should I click? And bullet points are going to help you do that a little bit better.
Awesome. Just looking through some of the other questions, there's some that are specific to AdEspresso, and just make sure that if you've got anything like that, tweet us at AdEspresso or join our AdEspresso University Facebook group. You can get that from the university section in your AdEspresso app there. We've also got a training course there you'll see within AdEspresso University where we can answer questions about pausing and stopping things. But some people are sort of saying, how do I introduce more experiments into my ad campaign? And one thing I'd say there is just be careful of changing too much within an ad set because Facebook does have a learning phase. So if you start introducing too many things too often, that can really upset the Facebook algorithm. So it's good to test, but I think it's probably good to test in a batch. Do you agree with that, Anna?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's where, what we typically do when we work together, where we write the matching ad copies with the headlines. That's kind of a good way to test kind of one or two theories all at once. You're testing one specific thing. It might be messaging or offer or style, but you're testing kind of one thing. If you try to do too much all at once, you're really not going to be able to sort through the results, and the results might be a little bit inaccurate because of the Facebook algorithm disruptions. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
I've got a few people here asking for any tools that you use. So if there's anything for landing pages, or if there's any just like writing tools, I don't know whether you use anything like Grammarly or you've got any just little tips or tricks on anything, any software that can help people.
So I personally don't. I know that a couple of my copywriter friends, the tool that they use is Hemingway, which I want to say is an extension, and it really helps you kind of shorten things up because typically shorter copy, just in terms of like the sentence structure, that doesn't necessarily mean length of overall copy. Shorter is going to be better. It's going to be a little bit more concise and a little bit more clear. So Hemingway can help you do that. Hemingway was known for kind of his very short, simple phrases. That's typically the only one I would recommend off the top of my head for copywriting. For content writing, if anybody has any questions about that, you can shoot me a message. I have a whole list of tools that I can refer you to there.
Cool. We've got Victoria asking about what's your view on advertising with video, and I guess to like adapt that slightly. Do you use any different ad copy if you're using video? Do you find that like the video explains more and you use shorter ad copy, or is there any sort of tips that you've got there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Most of the time, the ad copy will be a little bit shorter when I'm creating video content because it's like you said, the video does actually explain things pretty well, but you still want to use the description in this case to explain to users why they should view. Even though autoplay is a thing, it's really hard to you have to, I think it's users decide within the first 3 seconds and sometimes even within the first second if they're going to watch the video, if they're going to keep scrolling. The description, if you kind of have a little bit of a slow start, can explain what the offer is. It can explain why you should watch the video. But again, you can do that really quickly. It doesn't need these great big long paragraphs because if you have a bunch of paragraphs and a 30-second video, that's just too much effort for most people. They don't care that much. You have to make them care, and so shorter is better in that case.
Great. So I think we've got through most of the questions. Our apologies if we didn't get to some. GoToWebinar's been a bit glitchy, cutting off some of the questions there. But if anybody's got any more questions, they can tweet us at AdEspresso or can go on to Anna's website there. So we'd be happy to answer any there. So website is annagotter.com. So I think that's ANA. Gotter. Have I got your name right there? Yeah, there we go. We got the slide there. So, yep, you can reach out to Anna or you can reach out to AdEspresso and we'll be happy to answer there. And so we'll go and put a replay on YouTube soon, and we'll also link to that from our Facebook group. So thanks for everybody for joining us, and yeah, let us know how you get on with your new tests on your ad copy. I hope it works out for everybody. And thanks for joining us today, Anna.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thanks, everybody.